I have talked to people where when we're talking, I almost feel like we're living in different dimensions because
Absolutely.
because of like what I'm interested in and in what they're interested in. It's kind of amazing. Like it's
Hey everybody, it's Tanya here. I'm so excited to share Women Working with Light. It is a series of interviews with women from around the world who are doing what they love in service to themselves and to others. They are our healers, light workers, way showers, starseeds, artists, channelers, and so much more. In this episode, I speak with Wendy Wright of Light Always Wins. Wendy is a farmer, an alchemist, and a mystic. And we had such a great conversation with so many topics, I've had to split it into 2 sections. So enjoy, and don't forget to check out part 1, and the link is in the description. Source experiencing itself. And I really resonate with that concept. And I find it a bit of a guide for me because like you, I went through a lot of periods. I was probably way more judgy than most people, just a lot to do with my upbringing and that I'm very educated. And so there was at one point, a real, in that field where you are in universities and studying and, doing this type of work, there's really a hierarchy of, knowledge equals in better standing, better person. Total bunkus, frankly. I know people who are tradesmen who have much more interesting awareness and concepts of spirituality and life than people that have taught courses. So, yeah, that was judgy in of itself. But
I'm a farmer and I'm like, that's right. That's right. Oh man, and don't get me started on the universities either. Oh gosh.
Yeah, okay. That's all. I think the whole school system is reshuffling, reshifting. I keep seeing the image. Yeah, I'm so visual today. When I talk to you, I get so many visuals. It's fantastic. Our energy feels
awesome.
Like totally pinging off of each other. And for those of you that are listening, isn't this fantastic to be able to connect with people and have that resonance where you're just like back and forth and that deep connection? That's why I'm doing this podcast, because I just love it. But I divert myself now. All right, so you're talking about source experiencing itself, and I think this is something that's a challenge for people. I tend to go back because I do some spiritual teaching in the work that I'm channeling, and I used to teach and do that naturally. But I think if you are listening to this or watching the video and you are feeling that sense of what the heck am I supposed to be doing here? And there's all these concepts and, I thought I was doing something right, but someone else said it wasn't right. And, it comes back to explore, research, have fun, play with it, follow those little golden threads, as they say, that light you up and make you go, yeah, that's really cool. Like they're talking about Egyptology. That's neat. But they also were talking about this concept of multi-dimensions. That sounds really cool. Take a right and go follow that lead. And I think that's really important. And it does play back into the whole concept of source constantly wanting new experience, because we're part of source. Therefore, that knowledge is in us. And that same drive for interest, for curiosity, for learning, for expansion, for growth is in us. Because otherwise, why would we be doing this? So what's the point of coming down here if it's not duality? Right?
Yeah.
We're doing that already somewhere else.
What you just said, I swear, just like lit up all my chakras. Like that made me so excited. Like just to, I hadn't thought of it that way. Like, of course, I understand we're a part of source, but that drive for experience and that drive for learning, I never connected it to what you just said, like source wanting to experience itself. That makes me so happy to connect it that way.
And I think also experiencing itself, but what you said, which really made me go, yeah, that's a really cool idea. I like that. It's sort of pinging, is the constant new experience through the energy of a new incarnation, right? So you have this little energy blob over here. There's Tanya. She's having these experiences. There's Wendy. She's having these experiences. We might be having the same, like we're both going through a really intense solar storm in this particular timeline. I'm experiencing it this way. You're experiencing it that way. Someone else is doing it a different way. Like imagine, right? Infinite. It's infinite possibility and exploration and energy. And I think like going back to the toroidal field, which is really cool for me because I actually see that sometimes when I'm meditating and sometimes when I connect in and I'm doing grid, excuse me, I'm doing grid work where I'm connecting with other beings or energies around the earth and helping in whatever way. I see the toroidal field and it is all life and it is all energy. It is not just a singular. It's a compilation like our consciousness. So there's so many wonderful things coming online for people to play. And like you were speaking, I love the concept of the different ages of man representing spiritual enlightenment, if we want to call it enlightenment, but growth and cycles and moving. But to see where we are now as the next step, that we're on the precipice of the end, I don't see that either. I think we're just beginning. Things are just starting to get fun, you know?
And when I first awakened, I thought that it was probably because my awakening was so drastic. I literally thought like there was going to be an overnight switch. And there's also like people out there who sort of try to lead you to believe that's what's going to happen for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe they actually believe it, or maybe they're trying to get so many people to believe it that it will happen. I don't know, but I kind of
investment of energy. Sorry, I'm disrupted you for a second, but I'm just paralleling what you're saying. It's that I think a lot of people are really stuck in the investment of energy and pulling as many people to them as they can. It creates then its own little field and off it goes.
Yeah. So I thought like, and this was actually, I kind of skipped this part. The original version of the yugas was starting from a golden age and coming all the way around to a dark age. And then a catastrophe would happen. And then it would start again at the golden age. So I think humanity has done that a few times in the past. Like we know about the Great Flood. We know about certain catastrophes, like you hear about the fall of Atlantis. Not that we can necessarily prove that, but lots of people intuitively, you know, I think Plato wrote about it as well. But anyway, there's this like collapse of civilization. And there's some people who believe we're actually like kind of traumatized by those collapses if we lived through them. And that's why we always think there's going to be something big that's going to happen.
Which is then creating it.
Well, that's a great point too. And so now I actually think that I don't think it's going to happen that way necessarily, where I just don't see like a huge earth-wide catastrophe wiping out most of civilization. I think that this is the time that we stick through this dark age and start to rise up out of it.
Well, and I'm going to just take myself backwards a second where I said we're creating it. What I think instead is we're not creating it. We're creating possibilities, like little pockets. Like if you think of a timeline as like a branch with all the branches coming off, and then you have these little buds, like little rose buds, because I've been playing in the roses today. And that little rosebud is a possibility. As some people will call them a paradigm, where you can jump in. I call them, it's like, you know, being a kid and picking up that toy. There's your little paradigm. And that paradigm says, hey, come on over here into this energy field. And in this energy field, we're going to have this outcome. And the more people that go in there, they are contributing to it. So I think one of the greatest examples, and there was actually studies done on this, as there were many things, which was World War II, that the collective consciousness decided that was an inevitability. And so the more people that jumped into that thought, the possibility became bigger and bigger. So the little bud got bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people went in there and were filling it out. And then it just became an all-encompassing thing. And so I think that also ties into manifesting and the whole concept of energy, thought, emotion, belief, creating, right? Because you're pulling that energy into this experience. And the more that you believe you've had it, well, then you're just going into it. Right?
Yes.
So are you following what I'm saying? Because I feel like I'm going off on my tangent here.
No, I'm totally following you. And what it struck for me was like how that's why like I don't really pay attention to mainstream media, because I don't want these stories being written for me that I invest my energy in. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I like to know what's going on, but this is another sort of advantage to getting really in touch with your soul, is that it really opens up that third eye where you start to see through bullshit. You know what I mean?
Bullshit meter activated.
Exactly. And so, you start going, okay, yeah, I can see like how that story is manipulating people to turn against each other. Things like that is what I see a lot. So I absolutely agree. And that's what I was referring to as like what you were referring to as the bud. I call those like egregores. Like, have you heard that term before?
Yeah.
So it's like an idea that almost becomes like an entity, or maybe another timeline,
Mm-hmm. And I think also that is how, there's so many topics. I love talking to you. Because I think as we're talking, we're also tapping into these timelines and the possibilities. And so that's why they're coming forward. And I think the whole concept of media and influence is very interesting. It's not new. It's just in a different form. It goes back to what we call age of antiquity, right? There was always influence through government, through politic, of people who had their own desires and needs. And you just, put it out there on a platter and say, who's going to come and eat some grapes? And, you might put a little maple syrup on the grapes, and they're even a little more enticing. I don't know where I'm going with this analogy, but people will follow that. And so I think that is where the timeline is splitting. And this is a very oversimplification, of course, but I'm trying to bring what I see, sense, feel into this conversation, where I see it like a split happening on the backbone. My internet stuff, being part of the internet since it was created back in 93 when the web came online, and understanding the whole concept of what's called the winter bone, which is your main line, and seeing its splitting. So that main line of belief timeline, for those of us that are here in this now moment, again, is those principles of belief systems. Like, what is it that we as a group believe are our truths? And then you see those truths through everything. So like you were talking about, is it yuga or yurga?
Yuga.
So the yuga, which in my mind I'm seeing as time spiral, which I'm also seeing as, I think there's like there's a Buddhist symbol. I'm not a Buddhist, so I don't know. Somebody who does, maybe you can comment below or let me know. But again, seeing that, when people talk about truth, for me, truth is in the parallels, right? So you will see that thread again and again and again, and that's that thread that everybody has agreed upon. And then from there, it splinters out. So it's like time, right? We've up to now, in our human history, we've had this agreed upon belief system that time is linear, and it served a purpose, But now there's many of us who are like, yeah, I don't know if I get down with that anymore. It doesn't really. Time is not linear, and I have examples, and other people are seeing that too.
Yeah.
And so there you go.
Ooh, I love that you mentioned that, because this is something I think about a lot, where like you talked about these agreed patterns, or these agreed, like how we agreed on like what color the sky was and all of that. that's what I like to call the organic matrix. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
the patterns, it's the archetypes. And
Yeah.
I was listening to a conversation between a couple of guys. One on Instagram is Words Are Vibrations, James McCrae. And he was talking to this guy who has a podcast called Third Eye Thoughts, and I can't remember his name, but they were talking about humanity creating a new myth. And, it was really hard for me to imagine there being a new myth. But perhaps what you're saying is we are. But then again, when I look at these yugas, I just feel like there's nothing under the sun that hasn't been done.
Oh, but there is.
But isn't it the same essential thing, just being done in a different way?
Maybe. Perhaps I'm very naive and simplistic in my thinking and my approach. I don't know. I just see constant evolvement in as we open up and remember that we have all this information and everything is within, and that we are of source and infinite, how you want to label it, that we are tapping into things that we haven't done before. And perhaps if you mean by they've all been done before in another timeline or a concurrent reality, sure. But in this one, I don't think so.
Like I like to think about like going back to like Lemuria or something like that. Like, are you familiar with that time era, or have you ever explored?
Through others, and I've seen many descriptions and energies of it. And for me, Lemuria and Atlantis have a parallel story, and sometimes they get intermixed with people. And I think Lemurian, from what I understand, and please correct me if your beliefs are different, Lemuria was more spiritual based, where Atlantis was more tech based. And that Atlantis basically, the powers that be, aka insert the simile here, people, that the people in power were doing things that they really shouldn't have been doing, and basically destroyed their civilization with their technology. Whereas opposed to the Lemurians, who were very much about connected to the earth. A lot of people believe them as star seeds and seeded information and different races with them. For instance, all the time crystals, all the being a crystal caretaker for so long, and working with Lemurian crystals and seeing that information in them. A very different state of being than what we have up to now experienced.
So what I kind of feel is that all of those kinds of memories from that time and the abilities that we had in that time, I feel like that is what we are gradually remembering and sort of working back towards. And obviously it's not going to be exactly the same again. It'll be new with like all of this stuff that we've invented and come up with. It's really wild when I think about all of the gadgets and the stuff on this earth now. But like I feel like it's a remembering. Like I don't know, like it'll be new to us now, right? Yeah. But also not, because we have all that memory within. It's all around us.
And not only is it around us in energy, thought, and whatnot, but physically, like what they're unearthing in mining, what is happening with the melting of the polar ice caps and whatnot, or whatever paradigm you're in, folks. You might be in a different timeline where things are a little bit different than that. And I think that's the joy of living in this aware state now, that we're just starting to wake up from sleep, which is why things like The Matrix is so popular with so many people, the Matrix movies, because it's that collective consciousness of people going, oh yeah, maybe this is all just a hologram. So many things. But again, it's that, where do you want to play today? Where do you want to go? What timeline do you want to be in? And that's something I catch myself doing a lot, where I'm highly sensitive and highly susceptible to media. Therefore, I'm very careful what I allow into my energetic field now, because I grew up as a child of TV, right? That's how we lived. It's TV constantly.
Yeah.
And so all these ideas and concepts that weren't really mine, I never thought, right? I just accepted as face value what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
And when that stopped, a whole different world happened. And then sometimes I'll find myself, for instance, this thing where I got really fearful a couple weeks ago, where it was sort of a different paradigm, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole where I hadn't before and was exploring that and had that experience. And then afterwards I was like, yeah, I'm not really digging this timeline where, you know, everybody's in absolute fear and, you know, the world blows up and, you know, everything has to die to rebuild, but in such an extreme way, you know.
Yeah.
So now I'm just kind of catch myself and go, yeah, I don't know, I think I'm going to do something different. And so I find that I jump into creativity because that is my thread that I've always had. That's one of my golden threads. And I love it. I feel very blessed to have that I can tap into that and then shift things. I'm not saying it's immediate, but it is something that I can do. And I always encourage people to find that thing. You know, what is that thing that allows you to pull yourself out when you're afraid or you're grieving in a place where you don't see an end, or whatever we call the lower base emotions. So yeah, dances with reality, right?
I love that. How do we make a meme of that?
I think that's my spiritual name, Dances with Reality. I'm just thinking the old Kevin Costner movie.
I love it. Well, you took me back too to this, like, I was writing the other day because I was reading Carl Jung's book, Man and His Symbols. And I think about like tribal cultures a lot, or if you want to call them indigenous cultures, like the people who never really left the jungle or wherever, or the land, and weren't exposed to all these outside kind of inputs and influences. It's kind of amazing what a spiritual connection they have, because like they would go outside. I mean, they were outside most of the time, and they would look up at the sky and they would know like the clouds are moving this way and the wind is going that way, and this type of bird is flying by. This is what the weather's going to do, you know? Mm-hmm. And like they had all of these observational skills because they had to survive. And it's funny because it's nice how our lives have become so convenient now where we don't necessarily have to do that. But I also look at it and I say, well, what did we trade it in for? You know? And now then I like immediately have this vision of, hey, Alexa, what's the weather today? You know, like, and I'm like, Alexa is the new oracle.
That's me all day, all day. Hey, Google, what time is it?
Yeah, that's the new oracle. And it's really, you know, I'm laughing about it because you have to, like, it's just so crazy. It's so crazy how quickly technology took off when you look at the grand scheme of time that we tend to look at. It's wild how fast it's advanced, you know, and it just makes you wonder, like, what the hell's going to happen tomorrow? You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think about what's going to happen tomorrow myself, because I'm just kind of in that flow state.
That's good.
Usually.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't have worry and anxiety like every other person, but
I try not to, you know, like I don't say that to make people worry. I just like am really kind of curious, you know, and it is good though. It's a good reminder to try to just stay in that present moment. Like when you were talking about having creativity and just pulling yourself out of that, whatever that timeline is that you're like, maybe I don't want to feed that, and starting to create. That's exactly what I was talking about that energetic field and becoming like a beacon. It's like, we got to remember we're co-creators. Like we're creators and co-creators. Like we're all creating this experience by whatever choices we make. It's like,
yes, absolutely.
Every moment you have a choice, and yeah, I guess they all exist.
Well,
But
and I want to add to that we all are doing it in our own way. And I really want to share that because that's something that I really, really struggled with. And I still do sometimes, where I feel like I'm just not getting it. I'm not getting it. How come it's not coming? And then I really get stuck in a spiral of I'm doing it wrong. I should be doing it this way. A perfectionist attitude, all of that old fluff that a lot of us are letting go of these days. Not every day is a happy-go-lucky, hanging out with the roses, super flow day.
yeah,
It's part of the human experience, right? Is you wouldn't appreciate that moment of levity and lightness of being if you didn't have the opposite,
yeah,
and vice versa. There is a saying about the devil, or being in the energy that has resonance. Sometimes you are enjoying the what people call the bad day or the bad experience, but I don't think that is good or bad. I just don't know what language to use around it. Frequency, I think, is a good one. Different
yeah,
density, right? And so sometimes you're having a lower density experience. And I think a challenge for a lot of us is allowing ourselves to not judge ourselves and just say, yeah, I'm having that. I had that. Now it's done. And I'm going to go try this over here
yeah,
instead. And so when people say to me, like, what do you think about the future and stuff? I kind of just say, well, I don't.
yeah,
I have a sensation of it. And
yeah,
what I think that I really follow now is feeling like I have an innate knowingness about certain things. And some things are very subtle and some things are very strong. And without going into the the wormholes that are some of the dark things, there are some things that are happening in the world right now that I've seen or encountered or heard about. And it's an instantaneous of, that is not right for me. It doesn't mean it's not right. It's not right for me. And I don't want to live in that time and space reality where that's got a hold. I might experience it here or there, but it doesn't mean I'm going to follow it and jump into it and explore it at the cost of everything else, which I think, what I want to sort of end on with on that particular point was, if you are someone finding yourself going through that, it's okay. Have fun with it, explore it, allow yourself to really feel it, saturate your bones with it, have the experience. And then when you're done, let it go. And don't judge yourself harshly that you had that experience, that you did the shadow work, that you did the research, that you went into the dark internet or whatever. Just don't, if it doesn't feel right, don't hang out in there.
yeah. I love how you put that, because you also just brought up sort of the ideas of denial and acceptance for me when you're talking about that, because I kind of feel like, some of the things that when we judge it really harshly, it makes it almost impossible for us to accept that. I mean, like that is happening, because there's things that are happening that we can't really deny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like pulling it into your energetic field and being like, yeah, I got it.
Like when you deny it, or when you, yeah. So I agree. And it's funny, isn't that counterintuitive? You know what I mean? To see something you don't like and deny it, and then realize well, actually, if I just accepted that that's like what's happening, and whatever, maybe not even my reality, but someone else's experience, but really we're all in this together. So there are certain things that are happening that we can't deny. We really have to accept them if we don't want to get stuck and suffer. It's the more we resist, the more it persists, the more we deny it. It's I've just found myself in that, I was talking about earlier, about how there's just parts of me that I was really trying to push down, and it doesn't necessarily mean I have to show that part to the world, but I realized how much I was really suppressing it within myself. And I just noticed this past weekend, I spent some time with family, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my filter off. I'm just gonna I'm not going to suppress that anymore. Like, I'm just going to be me and see what happens.
Oh, how was that?
Oh, freeing. Oh my gosh. Like, and I don't think I did any damage. Um, that's what we're
Everybody's
worried
intact.
about.
Everybody's good.
Yeah. Well, it's like that's what I'm always worried about. I'm always worried about hurting other people or hurting other people's feelings because I'm an empath and I can feel what they're feeling. You know what I mean? I know. And so it also was this detachment. Like, I can't control what your perception of me is, and I can't control what your perception of reality is or the perception of what I say is. So why am I so worried about it?
Mm-hmm. And it's the whole concept of nature versus nurture, and what we are sort of exposed to as children, and how much of that is actually influenced our life, or are we tapping into the consciousness that is around us? Is it both things at once? Is there even more going on that we don't know about? And it gets to be exponential. And I think that part of the playtime, this is my theme. I'm going to make a mug that says playtime. And part of that is just sort of that self-exploration of what's going to make me feel okay. And,
Yeah.
I can speak to this as somebody who's been through years and years of these challenges where I was so self-leashed because of the way that I was brought up. And then it became my own perception, but then society, and just seeing the shifts that have happened. Like, one of my favorite things that I've seen in my lifetime, well, there's two. The first is the acceptance of people, as opposed to you're this color, or you're this ethnicity, or you're this sexual orientation, or you're this religion, or you're this whatever. And watching those walls crumble is amazing. And seeing people not only going to different explorations, but now sort of saying, you do you and I'll do me, and that's okay. And hey, I might be interested in what you've got going on, and you might be interested in me, instead of the division.
Yeah.
Right. So of course we have this like extreme duality, but also this openness and acceptance. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is, going back to when we were talking about physicality and being embodied, is especially of the women of this planet, especially in the first world, where there is this bombardment from the time of awareness of being a very particular way. Look away, feel away, do this, don't do that. If you do this, you're going to have problems. If you do that, you're going to have problems. And just the bombardment. I mean, I've got two nieces. One of them just graduated last weekend. Talk about a time shift. And to see what she's got at her fingertips now is resources and support, compared to when I was a child, or my ancestors were children, where none of that existed. There was none of that. Like, you did things a certain way, and that was that. And so that you didn't have a lot of expression. And so for those of us who are sensitive, we really, I think, went inwards. And I think that's why we see so many people that are sensitive who are on the spiritual path, because there is that space. You're blocked in one area of your life, but there's another part that is wide open. And so off you go. You put on your backpack and your explorer goggles, and off you go to see what you can find.
I just pictured like Dora the Explorer.
I know, I was totally thinking that.
Cute. I see myself like that a lot, like as a little cartoon character, like a little girl. Like that, I feel like a Cabbage Patch Kid. So that resonated with me a lot.
It was so funny. You know what I really want to talk to you about? Well, we have time, because I don't know anything about this, and I'm really fascinated by it. And I know that you offer a service for people where you do readings with Sabian symbols. So tell me about that, and what that means, and how that is why would somebody do a reading for that?
Yeah. So, okay. Sabian symbols were something I came across through astrology, and they're directly related to your astrological chart. So when you look at your astrological birth chart, it's a circle and there's 360 degrees in a chart. And your planets are in various places, different signs at certain degree points. So there were these people, Elsie Wheeler was a medium who channeled these symbols. And it was the idea of Mark Edmund Jones. He wanted to just see if he could come up with a way to describe the journey of the soul. And so he wrote down like every symbol of this wheel on a flashcard and had them all upside down and shuffled around. And then Elsie channeled like a clairvoyant vision for each one. And they did this in like 2 hours. And so she wrote down whatever this picture was that was coming into her mind on the card. And then they went on to sort of expand on what they thought these symbols were metaphors for. And what's funny is that my Sun and Venus symbol basically mean that I have a knack for seeing through metaphors and signs and symbols. And so, of course, I gravitated to these Sabian symbols. And so what I do, what's wild about it is when I found them, nobody showed me how to do this. I looked at my chart and I said, I'm going to write a poem and a story. The poem is going to be where all of my planets are and the little like symbol that Elsie channeled. And then my story is going to be these like slightly expanded versions. And it's cool because the poem is like the symbols are very kind of abstract. Like they're just a lot of different visions. Like I don't know, a few of mine are like rolling out a rug for children to play, or the gate of a garden opening, just little visions. So like, as you read it, it's not necessarily like something with, I'm trying to think of how to describe this. I feel like when you read it, you can kind of get these little visions. And because it's connected to where the planets were when you were born, it's a part of your soul blueprint. So there's something that might resonate with you. And maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't right now. Maybe it will later. Maybe it'll mean something now and mean something different later. Right. And so it just really helped me because like if you're not super familiar with astrology, it may give you a different lens of how to see like your soul blueprint. But even better, like if you are familiar with astrology, you can look at, okay, so my Jupiter is rolling out a rug for children to play. So my Jupiter is expansion and it's beliefs and it's teaching. And so for me, I expand by welcoming everyone to come play. Like that's how it helps understand.
My Lego blocks just went like this.
Good. I was like, this is a lot. I hope it comes together. And so just another one of my symbols is my Mercury, which is how we think. Right. And communicate. And mine is a 5-year-old carrying a large shopping bag. So imagine like that's how I feel. I feel like this little kid with this huge bag of information and I just like need to dump it all out. And like sometimes it can be hard for me to organize the thoughts. There's a lot in there.
I find the symbols, the symbols of the zodiac interesting. So these are not the zodiac symbols. They're just in the same, like each one has its own symbol. Is that right?
Yes. So like say you're looking at the astrological wheel, there's 30 degrees in each sign. So when I look up your Sabian symbols, say your sun is at like 5 degrees Leo or something. I would look up what symbol is at 5 degrees Leo. And that's how I figure them out. But I do them in a particular order as well, because I think that the way that I look at them might actually kind of have an order to it about like as to when you're born, the moment you're born, to when you pass. And I feel like when I've looked at different readings, I can see how some of these symbols maybe somebody has experienced earlier in life. And then when you get around to the end, maybe it will be something that would come up later in their life. And I can say this because like I've read like Carl Jung's symbol. I've read some different like famous people's symbols who have passed. And so I've kind of seen that pattern with it as well. But yeah.
But wow, that sounds so fascinating. It feels like you're following in the footsteps of the people, like the oh, that word's not going to happen.
Progenitors? Yeah, I tend to do that a lot. I think that it's interesting with me. I think that I am sort of a medium, but my strongest clair is claircognizance. So it doesn't feel like I'm a medium because I'll just know things.
Yes.
So that's exactly what I follow. And it's taken me a while to figure this out. Like even since we talked, I'm like, but how do you know who you're talking to? You know what I mean? Like the channeling, I think I'm starting to understand how it works for me. And it's tricky when it's mostly claircognizance because it doesn't feel like it's from outside of you.
Mm. And, and it's really interesting because throughout this series of interviews or chats, I think I can already see that everybody I talk to will be channeling in their own way. And that's something that I think is really interesting because I feel that that is an innate ability that all humans have. Yes. And it's just a matter of using it. But it doesn't mean we have to do it all the same way. So everyone's going to do it in their own way. And it doesn't devalue what they're doing, and it doesn't make it any more special or novel. It's just done in an individual way, which is the joy of humanity, right? Everybody is totally different.
Yeah. And then I think like us sharing the different ways that it works for us might help somebody who is newer to it. And like maybe, for example, like how it's really hard for me to figure that out because of how it works for me. Maybe there's someone else out there like that will hear it and be like, oh, maybe that's what's going on, you know?
Yeah, I think that probably will happen. And that's very exciting because I can tell you when I started channeling, I really got hung up on well, what is this? Is this real? Oh, it's just my brain. It's just, I've got an active brain. That's just my imagination, and learning to accept that. And then I went down the whole, well, it has to be this way, like I have to meditate. I have to be in the lotus position for 2.5 hours to get to that space to channel. And then I have to do it this way. And then I let all of that go. And then it came on.
Yeah.
And then it was like, now I got it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's how I feel about the mystery school too. Like I feel that I'm channeling lots of different energies. Like I feel like I'm channeling different soul aspects of my own from past lifetimes that have done this work. I feel like I'm channeling whoever it is that I'm interested in. I feel like I end up sort of channeling. It's really wild. And somebody that I've connected really deeply with is Carl Jung, which, but I think a part of that is because he was on the journey of self-knowledge, self-realization, gnosis. I'm trying to think of all the words to describe what this is, but like the journey of sort of seeing the collective unconscious, and that's where you start to see like this organic matrix that we've been talking about, and you start to understand it more. So I think in a way I connect with him really deeply because I feel that I can see things that way as well. But sometimes it's just like uncanny how much I can connect with him. And then I'm sort of like, well, maybe it's because I probably channeled him too.
I'm sure you did. And it's so fascinating because I didn't know much about his spiritual side. And I can't remember the name of, there's some movie. This just came up on my YouTube clips the other day. And it was before I actually had talked to you to come on the show. It was probably 2 days before. And that's what I was like, I'm going to talk to Wendy. But how he was tapping into his psychic abilities and how he was having a really challenging time. I mean, I don't know the actual story, just what I saw in the clip. And it was, he was basically having visions of World War II before it happened, and having a very challenging time, sort of derailing his practice and whatnot. But previous to that, just his expansion on ideas and sort of challenging the status quo, especially since, Freud, and I didn't know that Freud and him had that mentorship relationship. So a fascinating show, strangely cast movie, but a very interesting concept. Ooh, for sure.
Do you remember the name of it?
Oh, I'll have to look it up for you, but I can find it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. And I love that. I also, when I was reading about, his relationship with Freud and how he sort of went a different direction from Freud, who was his teacher, that I feel like is another classic situation, like along the hero's journey, like that.
Yeah. And they actually touched on that in the movie a little bit.
That's so cool.
So it's angle and Oedipus complex, and it was like, oh, okay, where are we going?
Yeah, so all of these myths that we have are just different languages for the same organic matrix, for the same fabric of this universe. Like it's just a different way of telling it, which is why I asked the question, do you think we can change it or evolve it? Because a lot of these myths too are about like the gods, like and I always wonder, like, well, what is our imagination? Like, how can you say it doesn't exist if we can imagine it,
And is it free will or the illusion of free will under the guise of a higher power?
Ooh.
There's so many there's so many ways to go with it. It's just amazing. Yeah, I'm just sometimes I get overwhelmed by how many thoughts I have happening at the same time.
I know what you mean. I'm amazed at how focused we've been through this conversation.
I guess I should. Oh, sorry. I guess I should ask: is there anything else that you want to cover before we end?
I don't think so. I had such a great time chatting with you.
So did I. I just know that I feel like this could be like a recurrent thing.
Totally. I'm totally down.
So many good discussions to come forward. Well,
straight off podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, because I mentioned this earlier, but if you're catching this, or if I perhaps have edited this down into a smaller clip, check up here if you're on YouTube, or check the show notes if you're on the podcast, because Wendy has her own podcast, and I was a guest, but she has talked to some fascinating people, and boy, there's some really interesting, thought-provoking, joy-filled conversations on there, and I highly recommend checking it out. Now, speaking of, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at light.alwayswins, and my podcast is on Apple and Spotify. If you're interested in the Mystery School, you can visit patreon.com/lightalwayswins, and I've got all those links in my Instagram bio as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, so do check the show notes, folks, to find all the goodies. And if you're watching the video, hey, did you know there's a little button down there that says more, or you'll see 3 dots or a down arrow, and there's good stuff in there. Click that. Thank you so much, Wendy, for hanging out with me today. As always, so much fun. I can't wait till we get to do this again. I'm already excited.
Yeah, me either. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. And hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out with me. And I will catch you on the next round. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Women Working with Light. You can find out more about Wendy and the work that she's doing by clicking the down description and seeing more info, and also checking out her page in the show notes on podcast.tanyakucey.com. And thank you so much for being here. I really enjoy your support and your comments, your feedback, and everything that you share. It really does make a difference in helping people get information to help themselves that they might not have found otherwise. If you would like to help and support, please feel free to donate to the channel to help me to continue doing these videos and series. Every little bit helps so much, and thank you so much for being here. Catch you guys next time.